Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of Scriptwriting for Beginners with me, as always, James Brennan. Please do not forget to subscribe, like, and share, and all of that malarkey. Now, I did say in last week's episode, which I was suffering very badly from hay fever, so I do apologise for coughing and sneezing during the video. I was going to look at the Matrix script. However, I then went onto Twitter and I saw a massive debate ongoing about Mare of Easttown, which has just roughly finished about last week or so, which was a brilliant detective drama with Kate Winslet playing this kind of rugged, sort of small town detective, who drinks beer and all this kind of stuff. And the debate was very, very interesting to read on Twitter. Basically, it divided opinions about what a script should be and what it shouldn't be. Some people were saying that if an amateur writer did this, they would get dragged over the coals, and if you can only do this if you're experienced, blah blah blah. So I thought, what better opportunity to have a look at the pilot script itself, the first couple of opening pages, to not only talk about the issue at hand, which is where this opinion, this divide in opinion stemmed from, but also just to sort of see how it was written and pretty much why this script is so good and why the show was so good. First of all, what is very noticeable here is the amount of drafts and revised that took place. You're talking about a sort of a 24-day, like a 20-day or 24-day turnaround, and I mean the different amount of draft. It makes you wonder what the first draft was like, as opposed to the final draft, which is here. So without further ado, we shall go in. Right. So, Easttown, Pennsylvania, winter. Now, truth be told, I thought Easttown was a made-up town in America. I didn't know whereabouts it was set, and I didn't know it was in Pennsylvania. I assumed it would have to be on the East Coast, but whereabouts I wasn't so sure. Winter. Various establishing shots of Easttown, Pennsylvania, landmarks that will figure into our story later. It's still dark, the sun merely a suggestion of light. We see the cemetery overlooking a town, the Easttown Middle School, a stretch of Creedham Creek, water burbles over rocks, Brandywine Park, St Michael's Church, and finally the Carroll home. A light goes on in an upstairs bathroom window. Moments later we hear a scream that pierces the silent morning. The scream becomes the... Now, I didn't actually remember this from the opening. I do remember the establishing shots, which really gave me a sense of this kind of like Stephen King sort of vibe, this kind of very small town in the country, or the countryside-esque of America. And again, to say the landmarks that will figure into the story later, it's for the reader's point of view. It then gives you a sense of you're intrigued to know, okay, I wonder how the cemetery features into it, and I wonder how this then features into it. Not only does it intrigue us, it also establishes the scale of the town. We know that if these are the only sort of main landmarks, it can't be very, very big. And where you pan over, your location can also become a character, in as much as the reason this show works so well and the script works so well is because you have this small town mentality that everyone knows each other, so that the crime is more personal, and you can't do this because you might upset this person, and everyone is invested in each other's personal lives in some way or another. I think if you set this in a neighborhood in say New York, you'd have that, but then on a bigger scale, that you go to a different part of America or a different block, you're not known, whereas it's like happening in such a small circumference. It really heightens the tensions, and this is a transition. So the scream of a kid, as such, becomes the buzzing on Mare's phone. Mare's dead asleep in the bed. She stirs now, throws her hand over to the nightstand, and answers the call without opening her eyes. This is Mare. Now, interesting. Two things which I just would find, bearing in mind this is a pro script, quite a generic opening. Not so much this, but a generic opening for this bit. The cliche of being awoken in bed by a phone ringing, waking you up. It subverts. You think what does a scream link to? But hold on, we're not gonna find out that yet. It's actually a phone. This is Mare. Great way of just getting her name out there. At first, I had no clue what the title meant. Mare of Easttown. You thought, what is a mare? It turns out it's her name. It's a genuine way you would answer your phone. But also, boom, we know in literally one page, which is probably about 1 minute, this is who the show is about because her name's in the title. Easttown morning. Right. Now, this is where the debate kicks in. All of this bit, I personally, hide this bit, I would say perfect. It's quite wordy, but again, this is the writer's style, so I'm not going to comment on reducing the word count, because some writers do and some writers don't. Other writers will just say the age of the character, and that's pretty much it. Others will want to, talk about what they're wearing, and sometimes that's frowned upon because it's too specific. But I always say, if you want to write something and you want to include something because it helps you build the character for the reader's purpose, bearing in mind no one else sees this script apart from the reader and the actors and the actresses. Whatever you include has to help the production, the actors, and anyone involved in the production get a sense of who this person is and what the location is about. So anything that you think is going to help that, include it. Which is what, he's done perfectly here. Mare Sheehan, 43, tall and lean, with short brown hair and not a trace of makeup, stands outside the wreath-adorned front door of a modest split-level home. And I think not a trace of makeup. You could say, well, is the morning, does she apply makeup? But then you could then, on the other hand, say, well, the fact that he's mentioned it, is this a common theme? We know it's something that then when she does wear makeup during the episode where she goes on a date, it's such a shock to everyone around her. Like, man, you look well. It creates this contrast. Mentions what the home's like. She wears, and again, this is research because I wouldn't know a split level home, very specific of the area that it's set in. Maybe the writer was from the area or just did the research. I didn't know this. She wears a quilted barn jacket over flannel button down, Levi's and Essex gels. Clipped onto her belt is a gold Easttown detective badge and a holstered gun, basically. Now, people say you're not meant to write what they wear, but I always say, again, what they wear can reflect on characters' personalities. The fact is she hasn't got any makeup on and she's wearing a flannel down and a barn jacket, which is stereotypically quite rugged clothing. It's quite scruffy. It's not feminine. Then when we see that she's got a detective badge, we know her job already without her having to say, I'm Detective Mare. Here she could have said, this is Detective Mare. Who would answer the phone like that? You'd say, this is Mare. We can see that she's a cop by one simple thing, that she has a badge and a weapon. And I think all of this is then done to kind of, the fact is, we see her, we see the fact she hasn't got any makeup on and what she's wearing before she's a cop. So when you find out she's a cop, do you then think, that makes sense because what cop would want to put makeup on if they're going out to work straight away? Now this is where it gets very, very, very interesting. Here, she's a woman that still bears the imprint of her parents, devout, working-class Irish Catholics who taught her the value of hard work and the futility of complaining, and life is hard and that all there is to do is grin and bear it. It's an education that has served her well in her career, but left her hamstrung and unextraordinary as a mother. Now, brilliant. It's a brilliant character description. People's argument is, should this be included in a pilot script or on a separate, character breakdown sheet? Now, people are saying that this is a cheating way of telling the reader who Mare is or who more in-depth analysis of who Mare is. Other people are saying, and what's wrong with that? And I have to tend to agree with the people who say that, because and other people saying this is a script that the character that the actress, so Kate, this is Kate Winslet's script that she would be reading. Now, you could argue that anything that's mentioned here should somehow play out in the storyline, or how Mare comes across. Does she do stuff that relates because of this upbringing? Now, if we didn't know this, we then might either make our own assumptions up to why she's behaving in a certain way, or Kate Winslet wouldn't know how to play certain, or say certain lines, or how to play certain actions because of this. So I think, bearing in mind what I just said about aiding the reader in visualizing this character that you've spent so long writing, why not write something like this? People are saying that, well, if an amateur writer was to write this, it would get absolutely, criticised. You don't have things like this. All this information should be shown by character actions and character traits throughout the storyline. You shouldn't just write it in black and white for the reader to automatically now know, oh, okay, well, now I know she's working class, she's from a Catholic background, she's Irish, she has an attitude of just fuck it, get on with it. But I think the writer, you can clearly see that the writer has made a decision that he's going to be very, very descriptive. So it doesn't come as a shock that he's decided to include this. It's more of a shock of what's contained in it. It's such an insight, and it's an insight that normally is either done on a separate sheet, on like a breakdown sheet, or it's going to be revealed throughout the storyline. And this is where people have kind of really, 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 gone to town with, this shouldn't be allowed. But I personally think if it aids the reader and whoever is reading it from a production or an acting point of view, if it aids their performance or aids the reader's reading enjoyment, then why not write it? Growing impatient and in cold, she rings the doorbell over and over to no avail. Again, growing impatient, you show that you're growing impatient by tapping your feet and sighing. But rather than saying that, he's decided to say growing impatient and cold. You could say she's shivering. But rather than writing how she's going to react by being cold, or what being cold does to you, i.e. shivering, just in black and white, impatient and cold, she rings the doorbell over and over and over to no avail. Oh, for fuck's sake. Steps back, calls to the bedroom. Now this, again, links into growing impatient. So you could say, you didn't need to write that. You didn't need to write growing impatient. You could say she rings the doorbell over and over and over to Val, which would imply that she's growing impatient. And if she started to rub her body, you would know that she was then cold. And then the fact is that she then said, oh, for fuck's sake, would imply that she's not happy with being left out. Step back, calls up to her bedroom window. Mrs. Carroll, it's Mare Sheehan. I'm standing outside your front door in the cold. Again, it's a little bit like you've just said she's cold, and now you've got her saying in the cold. But I think she's stating the fact. I'm standing outside your front door in the cold. It's boom, boom, boom. She's not answering Mare. Mare turns to find an elderly neighbour at 85 retrieving a mouth from the box outside his front door. Morning, Mr. Clyde. No, she's not answering. Again, shows you small town mentality. Mare knows Mrs. Carroll. Mr. Klein knows who Mare is, and you don't necessarily get that in places that aren't small town mentality. All right, let me go inside and call her. Sometimes she forgets to put her hearing aids in. Great. Elderly neighbour shuffles back inside his home. Mare slips a vape pen from a jacket pocket and takes a drag. We hear a phone ring inside. A few minutes later, a window slides open. Mare, you out there? Mare steps out from the under portico and looks up at the broad face of Betty Carroll, a portly chatterbox, in an upstairs bedroom window. Oh, you're here. Grins, no shit. This is what makes you think that this is a script aimed for a character, because if she grins, but you don't have the bit no shit, a grin can mean many things, but a grin, no shit, you can visualise it. I'm on my way down. Betty toils down the stairs, dressed in the polystyrene Santa for a Virgin Mary necklace. So predominantly everyone in this area is going to be of some sort of Catholicism-esque, Irish-esque. She fits her in there, but I said, Mare, come on, Mare, just scrape your shoes on the mat first. Mare steps inside, wipes her assets on the welcome mat. Did you get my message? All three of them. What can I do for you, Mrs. Carroll? Mare follows Betty down the hall, past an old grandfather clock and shelves of seasonal knickknacks. I want to make sure you knew about this right away, so the community was in a safe case, safe to Purvis still on the loose. Next time, just call the station. Do you have the main number? I don't remember, but I trust you, and I don't know who the station will send out. Now, this shows you what not only does Betty think of Mare, but also probably the entire town. They trust her. This is why when things start to go wrong, they still have faith in Mare, but also then start to grill Mare, because it's like, you need to get this sorted because we trust you. Again, this is exposition, but it's genuine exposition, what you would say. I understand, but I'm a detective, Mrs. Carroll. I'm a detective sergeant, which means I investigate the burglaries and the overdose and all the really bad crap that goes on around here. Sounds awful. Maybe you should look into a different line of work. Brilliant. Very, very comical. It's right here. So you call me next time instead of waking me up. She's not happy. She's doing her bit for the community, but she really can't be bothered with something so minor. And I don't think we never found out this, but it just goes to show you that it starts off with a minor crime, but then builds up to this major crime that happens on. Great lines. And when we have a little look, if you then have a look at the ending, so spoiler alert. To end it, which normally ends on some sort of a cliffhanger, Erin's dead body lying in the shallow water, half submerged. All of her clothes have been removed except her panties. It's a hideous sight. She's been shot in the face. Very, 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 very brutal and brutal visualization. But it seems louder, imploring her to answer. Mare opens her eyes. Episode 1. So we end in the same way that that we begin, in bed. The phone rings, and then the phone rings. Very, very good similarities, which shows you that I know this takes place, I think, in maybe only one day actually, and that's probably why. From morning to night, her routine of her sleeping pattern hasn't changed. It's the events during the day that has changed. And that's roughly about 65 pages, which I think it roughly made sense about how long the actual show was. So I just wanted to briefly, touch upon that. And I do recommend checking this script out because it's fantastic. I mean, it was more the opening page, which I think a lot of people had problems with, apart from instead of the actual, majority of it. This writer has a tendency to be very, very wordy, but every word is used for a purpose. There's no wasted space, as they say. And I think that things like that opening, I would assume, has only been mentioned for Mare. It's the other characters, her, for example, Erin McMenamin, which is which also is a big main character. She doesn't get that bit of backstory. So I think by only having as much detail for one character, I think people should allow this. Would I personally take a risk in writing this in one of my scripts, this much detail? Probably not. I think that myself, I'd want to try to show this sort of information somehow during the storyline. But that's not to say that you shouldn't include it. But I think because of the fact that it was there and it goes against all the quote rules of script writing, it got people's backs up because they're saying that this isn't something that should is the normal to do. So And there's another thing as well. If you're going to write something like this, make sure that there's something in the storyline, uh, be it dialogue or a character action, that we then think, aha, now I get it. You know, because she's working class Irish, that means she can talk to the common person on the street. She doesn't have a class, a class phobia as such. Um, Life is hard and all we have to do is grin and bear it, especially um, she's not very great as a mother, and that is a main underlining theme throughout the entire series. I do think you wouldn't have lost anything by not having it included, but it's included, and if it helps the reader and the actor create in their own head how they're going to play it because of this information, then I think go ahead and write it. So that was Mare of Easttown, pretty much the opening 5 pages, with a little bit at the end we had a look at just to see how it then links to the opening scene. I do definitely would 100% recommend checking it out. In next week's episode, which is episode 9, I will be looking at the first page because I'm excited about this one. One of my favourite films, Sexy Beast with Ray Winstone. The opening page itself it's written in a very I wouldn't say unusual way, but it's such a local way of writing that you can't imagine anyone playing it but Ray Winstone. And I think the writers spent a lot of time in kind of trying to get across of who this character was purely in their writing. They've done a great job. So next week's episode, which is episode 9, we are going to be having a look at one of my favourite films, and I think one of the best films, and one of the best Ray Winston performances, and Ben Kingsley. We're having a look at Sexy Beast.